There's a big new Primaris Space Marine box set revealed today. We've got the missile launcher Marines of the Desolation Squad, the Brutalis Dreadnought, and also a new character. Let's take a look at what we've got in Strike Force Agastus. Hello and welcome back to Warspecs Tactics, where today we're talking new Space Marines, and today we're covering the reveals coming out of the LVO. As per normal with these big events, Games Workshop's put on a live preview show, a stream unveiling a whole bunch of new models, and Warhammer 40k didn't do too badly out of it today with 3 new Primaris kits. Let's take a look at the new box set overall, and then the new units in turn. So first up, this box set is called Strike Force Agastus. It's a new Space Marine box, and currently they haven't announced the release date. I'd guess it would probably be within the next couple of months though. I'll probably be guessing sometime in March, but it's not impossible it could be outside that. In Strike Force Agastus, you get the miniatures that you see here, 2 squads of the new Missile Marines, the Primaris Desolation Squad, the Brutalis Dreadnought, the melee version of the Redemptor, a new Primaris Lieutenant that isn't monopose for once, he actually has some options on the kit, plus a squad of heavy intercessors, I guess so you can fill this as a patrol perhaps. Overall, as Space Marine box sets go, it's pretty exciting seeing as the vast majority of the models are new. Getting 2 copies of the Desolation Squad will be nice if you want the Missile Marines. If your main draw is the Brutalis Dreadnought though, maybe not as helpful. The Lieutenants may be just a bit on the whatever side, seeing as Games Workshop has released a whole bunch of those, and the Heavy Intercessors I'm sure will be helpful to some people. They're not the oldest kit in the world. I feel like fewer people are going to have those in their army, say compared with regular Intercessors. Overall, for the price of this, I'm a little bit unsure as to how much Games Workshop are going to charge for it. In terms of the cost of the miniatures within the box, I'd estimate them to be around about £175, €230 or $290. Obviously that's doing a bit of rough and ready equating things to nearby things. The Brutalis Dreadnought to the Redemptor Dreadnought, and the Desolation Squads to some Havocs. Games Workshop often gives something around a 30 to 35% discount for this sort of thing, so I suspect that the range for the price that you might expect for this might be somewhere around £100 to £120, €140 to €160, or $180 to $210. I would bear in mind that there's always the possibility for Games Workshop to disappoint us on the price front though. I feel like the box is going to be popular. New Primaris generally sells quite well, relevant to quite a lot of armies. I feel like perhaps the main thing is going to be whether or not people actually like those missile Primaris though. With 2 squads of them, if you don't like the look or feel of them, then it's probably not going to be the box for you. Going through the new units in turn, first up we have the Brutalis Dreadnought. This guy is the much rumoured and anticipated melee Redemptor variant, and they did confirm in the stream that he's basically the spiritual successor of the Blood Angels Furioso, the one that you can get Blood Fists or Blood Talons on. The chassis of the Dreadnought is very similar to the Redemptor. There are a few different stylistic changes, but nothing enormously major. They said that he stands a little bit taller, but that's only due to the heavy stubber that's mounted on top. That twin Icarus heavy stubber replaces the Icarus rocket pod that was on the Redemptor on the top section, and the hull armament of this guy is significantly heavier. You've got the options of heavy bolters or multi-melters, swapping out those storm bolters or frag storm launchers. Rules-wise, this guy was rumoured to have a movement of 10 inches and have an extra attack with those talons compared with the Redemptor. The melee on those claws is rumoured to be very brutal indeed, strength times 2, AP minus 4 and damage D3 plus 3, or having the option for a sweep mode with double the attacks at strength 7, AP minus 3 and damage 1. The primary profile rerolls wound rolls, though the secondary profile reportedly does not. Overall, if that's accurate, he will be significantly more punchy than the Redemptor, as you'd probably imagine. I think having access to that sweep profile really is quite nice as well. One issue with the Redemptor Dreadnought is that it gets a few really high quality attacks, but could get overwhelmed and swamped with hordes, not being able to chew through them fast enough. Obviously whether or not it's going to be good will depend on the points really. I feel like it's potentially interesting on paper though. Twin multi-melters definitely isn't a small amount of firepower, and the combat profile does seem a lot better. They did show off the other war gear options on the Brutalis Dreadnought as well, and it does seem that the weapon options seem to tally very well with the rumours. On the top left here you can see one that's armed with the heavy bolters on the hull, plus the option if you take the Brutalis Fists as opposed to the Brutalis Talons, and according to the stream they are basically flat worse in melee, but they each come with a pair of fist-mounted auto bolt rifles, so you're basically trading out the very big melee profile for a lot of strength 4 shots. I feel like this is quite an interesting trade-off. I suspect that you're probably going to want to just keep it tailored to being the most vicious in combat as you possibly can, but in theory spamming out 12 more strength 4 shots is basically most of the firepower of a Space Marine squad just in itself. Particularly as assault weapons, you could actually still fire them when you're advancing, which you wouldn't be able to do with the rest of the guns. With the hull weapons, points would depend on which one's best, I think. Multi-melters are definitely the superior weapon over heavy bolters, but I suspect that like other Space Marine releases, I suspect you might be paying 10 points more per multi-melter, and if so, that could make them a bit more take and leave, unless they're going maximal with the free war gear. The Twin Icarus Iron Hail Heavy Stubber is a profile that we already have. I believe that one would be 8 shots and +1 to hit against aircraft, and AP -1 so it can do some good work against chaff. Finally, they did give us a nice one painted up in Blood Angels colours, really harking back to the Furioso Dreadnought. It's quite nice to have some big close range melter firepower as well. Here's also a side by side of the Brutalis Dreadnought and the Redemptor Dreadnought. It's not necessarily to perfect scale or anything on this slide. The Brutalis definitely has a different set of legs with some slightly different styling on the armour panels and things, some slightly different knee guards. It looks like it's posed with a bit more of a dynamic pose, taking a step forward as opposed to standing stationary. In general though, they feel like very similar models, just with slightly different war gear. Moving on though to the other big new units, we've also got the Desolation Squad. These guys are basically Games Workshop's take on Primaris Devastators, and with the option of some anti-infantry or anti-tank style rocket launchers. They said that they're basically aims to fill in the same sort of gap as you might get for things like rocket devastators or heavy bolter devastators in a more standard firstborn list. I feel like model-wise, these ones haven't been greeted with quite so much universal love as the Brutalis Dreadnought. I feel like from initial reactions, the Brutalis Dreadnought seems to have gone down very well. People are a lot more divided as to whether or not they like these though. I must admit, they do look like absolutely no rocket launchers that you'd see in the real world, I guess. What they seem to have gone for is either 2 or 4 rocket tubes on the top of the launcher. I believe that they're named the Super Frag or the Super Crack rockets, probably 4 of them if it's frag and 2 of them if it's crack. And then under that, they've got the little rotary rocket launcher, which I believe would be the Castellan launcher. I think that that's the one that would be firing out of line of sight. I feel like maybe it's just a little bit unusual looking because they've decided to mount both of those rocket launchers on the same barrel, even though they'll probably be firing in quite different ways. I was kind of expecting that the Castellan launcher might have been the thing that was mounted on their shoulder, but that turns out to be a scanner pack. I guess it's not like Warhammer 40k doesn't have its fair share of goofy and crazy looking weapons though. Otherwise, I would guess that there's going to be 5 of these to a box, even though there were 10 in the main kit. I think it's more likely the case that you get 5 of them in a set, and in the box set there's just 2 different units, as opposed to going the whole hog and having 10 of them in one box set. The Sergeant has an alternate head and can be modelled firing a bolt pistol, it would seem, and it looks like he's got an even bigger missile launcher with just the one enormous rocket tube attached to the Castellan launcher. If that tallies with the rules, then I guess that would be the Vengeance launcher, also one that can fire out of line of sight and hit significantly harder than the Castellans do. I found the name kind of interesting as well. These guys are the Desolation Squad, as opposed to the million variations of Primaris that end in ers or ors. Desolation Squad might just feel a little bit out of place next to your Eradicators, Inceptors, Intercessors, Infiltrators, and more. I did see one rumour that was calling them Desolators. I kind of wonder if Games Workshop just decided to change the name from that, just as a bit of humanitarian aid to people trying not to get them confused with Devastators. Otherwise, from the miniatures, I'd guess that the Super Frag or Super Crack rocket are going to be a pre-game choice, as it does look like they're modelled differently. I guess that the Super Frags are going to be the little tubes, and the Super Cracks are going to be the bigger ones. And Games Workshop did confirm that underslung Castellan launcher can fire missiles out of line of sight, as tallies with the leaked datasheet. Will be interesting to see how these guys stack up in game. I feel like if their leaked points cost of 35 points was accurate, then I'm not entirely sure whether they're going to be one of the single best Space Marine fire support choices. They do have really quite a lot of competition from all the Space Marines that got free war gear at the moment. My prediction is that these are probably going to be kind of underwhelming rules-wise at the drop, but knowing Games Workshop, they'll often make them better later on. Finally, last and certainly least out of the new model reveals is the Primaris Lieutenant. Primaris Lieutenants are certainly something that Games Workshop haven't been stingy with. I believe that we're something like up to number 15 plus for unique sculpts at this point, more models than a whole load of factions have in their entire HQ line. I guess I've got nothing against this particular one, and to be fair to them, I feel like he might be a bit of a step up in terms of Primaris Lieutenant offerings. Unlike basically all the rest of them, he actually comes with multiple options within the kit. There's the option for a bolt rifle, bolt pistol or plasma pistol in the one arm, and then power fist, power sword, or pointy finger in the other. It's possible there might be some more options than this. Would be kind of cool to see a lieutenant just with the stock option of the chainsword. Perhaps give access to the Teeth of Terror for Primaris Space Marines for once. There's also a head swap, so you can choose to have the helmet or not. A choice of different tabard to have on the front of the miniature. but at least according to these previews, it looks like you probably wouldn't have the entire range of Primaris Lieutenant options available. It doesn't look like there's an option to give him a Storm Shield or that Neo-Volkite pistol or things, the one that was unique to the Indomitors box and now the 9th edition starter sets. The most interesting thing about him, I think, is arguably the Power Fist. This wasn't a weapon that he had access to before, and I guess it could be interesting enough as it's a weapon with a bit more punch than most of the other combat weapons that he has the choice of. I guess now feel free to add Power Fist to your other Primaris Lieutenants. I'm not sure I'd necessarily pick up this one to do so though. In terms of in-game power, I'd say certainly for the rest of 9th edition, the Indomitors Pattern Lieutenant with the Storm Shield and Power Sword is probably going to be the way to go. He's just 65 points now, and gets you massively better defense as well as a decent melee weapon, so if you just want the reroll ones and a bit of fighting power, he looks like the best. So anyway, that brings us to the end, and there we have the Strike Force Agastus box for Primaris Space Marines. Let me know what you make of the new miniatures, the Brutalis Dreadnought, and the Desolation Squad in particular, and whether or not you'd be tempted to pick up this box set or not. I'll be back to cover the other LVO previews for 40k in another few hours, so feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics or just check back later if you'd like to see more. Finally, if you have been enjoying all these updates, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description below. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.